We grow when we give.
We grow when we give.
We grow when we give.
Nosotros crecemos cuando damos.
We grow when we give.
与えるとき成長する。
We grow when we give.
Welcome to R.O.G, Return on Generosity, a podcast celebrating generosity at work. Not financial giving, giving valuable time, alternative perspectives, and genuine collaboration. Our special guest today is Tessa White, the founder of The Job Doctor and the author of The Unspoken Truths for Career Success. Her thought leadership on the modern workplace makes her a frequent guest on national television shows and a top-tier publication writer. She has amassed more than 1 million followers on social media, and she's ranked in the top 2% of creators on her live career sessions on TikTok. What I appreciate most about you, Tessa, is your positive energy, your experience, and your encouragement. You tell the truth and you give us tools and strategies in order for us to navigate our careers more successfully. So thank you for that, and welcome to R.O.G.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, I would like to think of myself as a truth teller. You know, there's no reason to mess around and waste anybody's time. I think that's in part why I've been able to do so good. But I really do love helping people figure it out because it's hard. I was on the other side of the desk at one point, and it's really tricky to figure out how to navigate dysfunctional companies and people.
Really tricky, and especially when you don't know some of the things that you share in your book and in your TikToks. So give us a little bit of your background, and I'd love to hear how you got to this place.
Well, okay. Let's see if I can do it in a short snippet. It's going to make it look like it was so easy, but it wasn't. I started out as a secretary back in the day when we called ourselves secretaries instead of admin assistants. And I just wanted something more for myself. I was pretty ambitious. I ended up getting into HR, working for Stephen R. Covey, great guru about leadership. And he was so wonderful, and his thoughts and his leadership changed who I was. And it was a wonderful place to start. And then if you fast forward 20 years, I ended up being the head of HR for Fortune 50 companies and, found myself doing some pretty cool things like leading compensation meetings and Blackstone meetings and, things that I only dreamed of doing. And at one point it was about, I think it was October of 2020. So pandemic hit, shut down. I thought I am going to help the other side of the equation. I want to help individuals figure out how to navigate companies instead of just spending all my time helping companies, manage risk for them.
Right.
And I made the shift, and it was just like, it's the idea that just wanted to happen because no matter what I did or how janky my videos were, I just seemed to hit a nerve with people. And 1 million followers later, here I am.
Here you are. Oh my gosh. And so how would you describe your generosity story? Like that's a span of experiences that you just, gave us the nutshell of. Give me an example of like whose generosity for you, like who saw your talent and gave you opportunities?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I had some really wonderful CEOs that I worked with, and not all of them were good CEOs. That's the thing. I learned a lot even from the bad ones along the way that taught me all kinds of things. But in particular, one named David Bywater at Vivint Solar. Vivint Solar, just to give you an idea, was a company that was about 4,000 people. I would say 3,500 of those were Gen Z, flat-brimmed cat, dudes, and about 10 adults in the room. That was the company. And it was a really difficult place for someone more mature to succeed. But I learned an incredible amount from that company, and in particular, David Bywater, who gave me tremendous amount of latitude to try crazy things and crazy ideas that didn't make any sense. And allow me to experiment and try things that I wouldn't normally experiment with because it was not an ordinary company. And the salespeople who were the bane of my existence at the time that just made everything so difficult were also the gift because I learned how to really creatively think outside of the box and try things that seemed absolutely crazy on the front. And that really spoke to Gen Z because that was the audience. And so when I left the company, I was able to have experimented in ways that most companies wouldn't allow you to. and learn a lot about what the rising generation in the workplace wanted so that I could help people.
Yeah, so it sounds like you asked a lot of questions and really tried to understand what their interests were, what their challenges are.
Just tried crazy stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
Vivint Solar was a company that it's hard to define it. I mean, as a head of HR, I got calls at midnight when there was a mall fight, for example, with the two solar companies, and they're like, "What do I do? I'm in a fight, and the police are here." I'm like, "I am not prepared for this." There were. They brought tigers into the building. I mean, that is a real thing that happened. And that is not something that happens to every HR person. So how do you deal with a tiger in the building? They just tried crazy stuff to get sales. And a lot of what they did worked, but they taught me in the process. I almost had a heart attack many times, but they taught me so much.
Wow. Well, when you say crazy stuff, you really mean it.
Oh, I mean it.
So how did you end up as the job doctor? I love the title, and I also want you to talk about your Times Square experience, right? So help us understand how that came to be.
I thought I was retiring to fly fish. I'd done my time. I had done what I thought I wanted to do. And then COVID hit, and you don't lock me in a house because I cannot sit still. And so I said, "Honey, I think I'm going to start a business." And I built a website, and my daughter said, "Hey, Mom, your stuff's really good. Can I post it on TikTok?" And I said, "Sure." I don't know how to even log into TikTok. It's really weird to me. And she put it on, and my son called me, I think it was 2 or 3 days later, from California. And he goes, "Mom, my girlfriend said she saw you on her For You feed on TikTok. Is that even possible?" And I went back and looked. I'm like, "Oh, I totally forgot about that." I had 10,000 followers.
Oh my gosh.
And so that began the journey. And literally the day I turned on the Job Doctor as a service, I have Rent My Brain sessions where I coach and help people. I was full. And it just happened. It was a beautiful, happy accident. And I'm an accidental influencer. And so, we turned on the website. I started posting every day, even though it was just mortifying and terrifying to do so. And it really seems to have struck a chord because I was getting calls from like NPR and Good Morning America, places that I have, Wall Street Journal. I have no business having them call me as I'm in my house just dinking around, with this idea. But I just took it and ran with it. So I guess I reinvented myself in my mid-50s, which was really a lot of fun.
Yes. And what made you go job doctor? Like, this is what I want to do. I want to help people with their careers. You obviously have an extensive HR career, but like there was something that made you think, I'm going to give people advice on how to navigate this.
I started with the idea of She Team. That was the first baby idea, was I want to help women because I was a single mom for 10 years, trying to raise a family, build a career. It was really hard. And then I'm on the other side of it. And I thought, I want to help other women figure this out. And then over time, I went, you know what? Men need the help too. It isn't just women. So my idea evolved from She Team into the Job Doctor. The Job Doctor literally came to me in a dream. I woke up and I said, I would like to be the Job Doctor. I went, nobody had the URL. I grabbed it and the Job Doctor happened.
There it is. Oh my gosh. You mentioning your being a single mom tells me a little bit more about your background that I don't think we covered yet. But I think it's really important for our listeners to understand a lot of the life experience that you've had, both as a human and as a professional. So just could you tell us a little more?
I found myself a single mom of 3 kids, no college education, and no way to make the house payment. I mean, that was really my humble beginnings. And I had to figure out a way to make all of that work. And it was a really scary time for me. I wasn't sure if I could do it. I just knew I didn't want my kids to worry, and I didn't want them to feel the same fear that I was feeling inside. And so I jumped into HR thinking, I get along with people. It's probably easy. I can plan parties and stuff. That's what I thought HR was.
Yeah.
And so that's why I got into HR. It was really more of an accident more than anything. It wasn't an informed decision. But I was a single parent for 10 years, and I ended up, one of the proudest moments in my life was being able to take a check and pay my house off in full and go, oh my gosh, I never thought that would be possible. And I was a normal person. And I just saved and saved and saved. I was the only executive when I worked at United Health Group this big company. Here's the line of executive cars in the parking lot. You got the Porsches and, all the fancy Mercedes-Benz and an old 200,000 miles 4Runner because I was saving so that I could pay off the house. And the freedom that gave me to then be able to make choices that were best for me was incredible. So that's why I'm still so passionate about you've got to be able to put yourself in a better financial position so that you can make choices that are best for you. Because it's amazing the choices you make if you're not afraid of starving. Right?
Brilliant. Yes. Right. And how do you do that? And there's ways to do that.
And I had no education. If I can do it, you can do it. That's the message for people is I've helped people that work in housekeeping services end up being software developers. I mean, you can change what you want to change. If somebody like me can do it, you can certainly do it as well.
What do you attribute that to?
Attribute just being able to get slogged through stuff.
Yeah, and to listen to yourself and to know how to prioritize yourself. I'm hearing you say as well.
It's a process for sure. I mean, for me, if I think back upon how I got from A to Z, it was I worked really hard. I made a lot of sacrifices. Things didn't always go the way I wanted, but I picked companies that were in alignment with they were companies growing, first of all.
Sure.
I always made sure I chose a company that I really thought highly of the person I would report to. I thought they were smart because I figured if I work for a smart person, they can teach me something that I can then utilize somehow. So I was pretty scrappy. And then I just made sure that I worked really, really hard. And I moved, not a lot, but I moved enough that I had a lot of experience. I worked in small companies. I worked in big companies. I worked in medium companies. So then I could create and decide what it was I did best and create a value proposition that I could then share and then end up making more and more money. Because when you're clear on what you do best, what your superpowers are, you actually make so much more money and you can get so much further than if you're waiting for somebody else to figure it out for you.
Right. Or trying to do everything, being great at everything. Yeah.
Oh yeah. You can't be everything at once. That is one thing. As a single parent, I had somebody tell me once, you can have it all, just not all at once.
Not all at once.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree with that. So what motivated you to write this book that I love and I want our listeners to get? The title of it is The Unspoken Truths for Career Success, Navigating Pay, Promotions, and Power at Work. I think it's important to reiterate those because you do help us to see like the lies and the truths in those areas. But like what was the catalyst for you?
Honestly, I wrote the book I wish I would have had. And I wanted to write it in a way that people could consume it the way that I consume books. And, when you're on TikTok, your attention span is short. And that's the way people think nowadays. So I didn't want a book that was long on theory. I wanted something that you could say, tell me about how to navigate pay. And you could go straight to the chapter, skip the others if you wanted, and you could read it. I wanted it to have things that were bolded and pictures and ideas of scripts and things to say and do that you could literally just scan and find it and in a Cliff Notes way. And I wanted it, and it was a very specific style of writing. It is a practical how-to guide with the practical things you need to say and do this, not that, that I just couldn't find anywhere. You can read books on theory on how you succeed all day long, but how often can you pick up a book and go, my manager is just giving me too much work and I'm feeling burnout. What do I do? Oh, here I go. You can turn to page 64 and you can look it up. And I just wanted to write something that practical.
Excellent. And there's stories that illustrate the theories or the guidance that you're providing. There's very specific actions that people can take. And then there is a flow. I think there's a very natural flow in the book. What's one of your favorite concepts in the book?
Oh, gosh. I have a lot of favorite concepts. I think my favorite concept is probably playing in the gap. And I think that that's important because so many people wake up and think that if I just follow my job description or do my job description better, I'm going to get ahead. And that's not how it works at all. I would hire somebody that's a hard enough worker all day long if they know how to prioritize the work that's important to the company. But a lot of people don't understand this idea. And that's what it's called, playing in the gap. It's how do you get the company from aspirationally what it says it wants to be versus
Yeah.
the broken down mess that it is.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you, within your job, solve problems that actually anybody cares about?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that a lot of us think that, and especially women, by the way, tend to think that if I just work hard, I'm going to be rewarded. And it just does not work that way. And you can work smarter, get rewarded, and in a company without necessarily giving up the quality of life either. Because I share a lot of stories about executives that I looked at that drove me crazy, by the way, because I'm looking at them. They're taking family vacations. They're not there late. They're getting promotions. I'm like, brown noser. And then when I really peel it back, the truth is they understood how to prioritize the work the company cared about the most. And
Yeah.
that's something that's available to all of us.
And so for those listening who haven't seen this yet, how could you identify what some of those gaps are?
Well, I would probably start by talking to your manager first and saying, what keeps you up at night? Like, what are the things that really keep you up at night about this department? Understand what they are. And the first thing I do anytime I have a new job, and you can do this even if you've been in the same job, go talk to your constituents, people that cross into and use the services of your department, and ask the question. So what do you expect? What are you hoping that I can do for you? What are you hoping this department does and what I can do for you? What you'll find is that the job on paper doesn't have much to do with oftentimes what people are expecting and need from you. And you have to be able to understand how to win. Number one thing, you got to identify how to win. Ask other people, ask your manager, and then keep your manager honest so that you don't get burned out by prioritizing 1, 2s, and 3s, and sit with them. When you at least every other week say, hey, here's my priorities 1. Are these still the top things? Here's the new things you gave me to do. I would put those in a 2 or in a 3 or put them in, and then you can have the debate. But staying aligned to where you can win is incredibly important because it changes all the time.
Yes. So what about when people look at that job description and they say, yeah, but the job that I got hired to do is this. Now I've identified all of these gaps. That's really at least 2, if not 3 people's jobs.
Yeah.
I'm overwhelmed. You're saying check with your manager.
I would, well, let me illustrate this with a story.
Okay.
I was working till like 9:00 at night every night. And my husband called me, and one day I responded with a text back to him. I said, and when he says, hey, are you coming home for dinner tonight? I just push that little button where it says, I can't talk right now. And I thought, oh, it's a little love tap to him. He knows I'm here. I got in so much trouble when I got home because he goes, it's rude. You're doing this every night. He goes, how many executives were in the office? None. Why are you there? Well, because there's just so much work to do. How much are you doing that nobody else cares about? Well, I have to do it. I have to do it. And he came down on me. He said, I'll bet you don't, because they're not doing it. You've got to get clear on what's important to do and what's not important to do. And that's the value of of having these prioritization discussions with your manager, because for most people that I work with, there's about 10 to 15% of their job that can just kind of slough off or be a last priority if you have time. But they're neglecting the big rocks. They're neglecting the big rocks. And what we end up doing is just first in, first out work. And we do the easiest stuff first if we're feeling burned out. And all of a sudden we end up with these big rocks that we can't fit into the day because we didn't spend any time doing the things that are going to get us the win, the things that are going to get us noticed in a company.
Yeah. And I mean, I love your reference to the rocks and Stephen Covey's, the way in which we can be effective as a human being, and like that priority. What are the priorities? How do I put those in first? How do I make sure that there's time for that? And then your story with your husband being one of those big rocks.
Yeah.
And why wasn't he getting,
I got in
space in
trouble.
the jar?
For those listening who don't know the Stephen Covey analogy, basically he says, here's 2 jars. And what most people will do is put the sand in, emails, reading emails, doing simple things, and the small gravel, which are, the things that you can knock off pretty quick. And then it gets full, your jar's full, and you can't fit in the big rocks, which are the big priorities. But if you do the big priorities first, the big rocks, then you put in the gravel, then you put in the sand, there's room for everything. And that really speaks to prioritization and time management. And I think oftentimes we get, if you're burned out, we are often finding when I work with people that the reason they're burned out is they're doing everything as opposed to figuring out what needs to go.
What really matters. And what do you say to people that say, well, that sounds good in theory, but I don't control, like, I know that these are the big rocks, but
Yeah.
this person's filling my jar with sand.
Well, I would tell them a couple of things. If you tend to just do everything that comes at you and say, I have no choice, when you get burned out and leave the company, which you will recreate the same dynamic in the next company. This is a you problem because your manager doesn't know when you're full automatically. They do not have a magic wand. They do not have a crystal ball to know when you're full. And so, so many people will tell me, well, if I did less, I'll get fired. And I'm like, I want you to think for a minute about people that are working a little less hard than you at work. Are they in trouble? Because there are people that you can identify that you're like, somehow they seem to do it. And it really is a fallacy, and it's a you problem. If you think that if you pull back at all, you will be fired. The problem generally is the way you're doing work and the things you're choosing to apply to your time as opposed to the other. And sometimes we have to have a conversation with our managers to simply say, I am full.
It's full.
Here's where I'm spending my time. Here's the prioritization. What would you take off this list? Because if you continue to take it on and take it on and take it on and either don't say anything, which usually is what happens, people just keep trying to be a good soldier and take it on. What happens is they end up a year later on a performance plan because they can't get to everything. And then they're penalized for taking on the extra work when they're like, I was the hero here in this story. And you're penalizing me? But that's what happens if we don't have good boundaries.
Right. And if we're not doing the things that people really care about. I think that was your key point there with the gap is like, what do people care about? What does winning look like? Who is winning? How are they winning? Right. It's just like understanding the way that game. I think of every organization like a game, and like your function within it is a subset of that game. But like, who's winning? Why?
And there are things that are going to fall to that third priority. And it is entirely fair for you to say, look, I'm going to try and do everything in the first priority. That's how we win as a department.
Yeah.
That's how you look good, manager. But if I don't have time to do it all, and if I focus and try and even knock off all of these that are threes, it will come at a cost of the ones. And then we aren't going to look good. And I would rather that we knock it out of the park on the things that matter the most, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Get agreement on that.
Right. And try and get some agreement. And the reason I know this works is because I was one of those horrible managers that kept throwing stuff at a really capable employee who finally came to me and started doing this every week. And it kept me honest. And he would say, what goes off then? You gave me this. I can do it. Of course I can do it. But let's see if I take this on. Is it a 1? If it's a 1, what goes off? And he kept me honest about it and allowed me to understand his capacity in a workday and what was in and what was out. And that's an incredibly important thing for people to learn in their career.
This is so important and a great segue to your first chapter that you titled Something's Got to Give. And as a woman, a mom, an employee, a volunteer, a friend, a neighbor, all of the things that we are, this often feels like it's just too much. Yeah. And so what advice do you have for people that are feeling exactly the way that would cause you to say something's got to give? I just can't sustain this.
I think we all hit that at various points. For me, I started the book with, it was, we knew that our daughter was suffering with depression. We were afraid she was suicidal. And I had to walk into my CEO and tell him, I'm going to have to take off like as of tomorrow and take a leave of absence in a really bad time for this company. And I did it. I just panicked when I said it because you can't take those words back. But he taught me something really important. He took out a glass of water. He stuck his hand in and he goes, I bet you're scared that when you leave, everything fills in around you like this cup of water, right? And I said, yes. As soon as I leave, people are going to do the job and then it's going to be impossible to come back. And I'm really scared for the implications. And then he showed me, put his hand back in the water. And he said, look what happens when I put my hand back in the water. Room is made. And he goes, it will be uncomfortable for a short period of time, but once you're back in, space will be made and you'll be able to fit back in. And he said, so make sure that you do the things that you have to do to stay mentally and personally in a good place, because the rest will take care of itself. And he was so right. I was gone for several months, and it was, like I said, a really bad time for the company. I came back. Was it hard? Sure. I had to kind of reinsert myself, but it worked just fine. And I remember that analogy all of the time when I get feeling like, oh my gosh, is it my career or my family? I can't have both. You have to make the decision that keeps you the most whole and the most okay, because some things can't be fixed, right? And the day after I left, our daughter tried to end her life. And I was so glad that I had been there and that I had the time off to be able to help. I never would regret that for a second.
No way. Oh, thank you for that. And I think it's important for our listeners to know that she's okay.
Yeah, she's thriving. She's doing great. And the thing is, it's we're living in a really hard world. When I say something's got to give, there are so many things that make it difficult now. And when I wrote this book, part of why I labeled it Something's Got to Give, I had a doctor who had left the practice of being a doctor because it was so complicated and difficult with insurance and such. He was working at Amazon, at an Amazon warehouse.
Like a warehouse.
And I thought, people are doing crazy things to try and just retain an ounce of sanity during a really hard time. And so something does have to give. And I think people have more power in the workplace than they think. Often they just think in a very one-dimensional way. I'm not happy here. I can't stand it anymore. Therefore, I'm going to leave, right? It's stay or go. But there's so many different permeations of solutions that you can have, from setting boundaries to the way, my other favorite chapter is how you talk through conflict and how you resolve conflict, because wherever you go, there it is. Same with politics. There's going to be company politics, no matter what company you pick. And so learning to thrive within the environment, I think, is a far easier than leaving a company. Then you have to put another 20% extra effort into showing, see, I'm that great. Then you have to go, how do I pull back? I can't give 120% all the time.
All the time,
and it is a bad cycle. So I like to teach people to work with what they have.
Yeah, because you take you with you. So
That's
when
right.
you're identifying as a part of the problem, not entirely the problem, but part of it, you're saying take ownership of that. And how can you tweak your approach? What are some of the things that you need to know? Which is really what's so great about this book is it's practical. It's like I don't care who you are, you can relate to some of these missteps or insecurities or whatever that people experience. Like in another chapter, you bluntly talk about the lies about performance. And one of them is about feedback.
Yes.
And you teach about the gift of feedback a lot. So like what is the lie and why is feedback a gift?
Well, the lie is that you're going to know if you have a fatal flaw, and you're not. You're just not. I'm in HR. I've had too many conversations where managers come to me and say they want to let somebody go. And I say, do they know it's coming? And they say, yes, they know it's coming. They don't know it's coming. And so feedback becomes so incredibly important because you have access to it at all times. And if you can get used to the feeling of getting feedback, which curls your toes at times, the more you get feedback, the more it's not scary. But we're in a world in corporate America where feedback feels punitive. You get the annual review. Everybody hates it, right? That annual review, it just, no, I don't want to do it. And so when feedback feels punitive and your manager says, can we talk? The fear of God strikes you. Then you're not getting enough feedback. But when you actively seek it, then you can make micro adjustments along the way. Because if somebody says something neutral to negative about you in a performance appraisal or something, I promise you it's 10 times worse than that. It just is, because we as people avoid conflict. That's why people get surprised when they get terminated or that they don't get the promotion. And so feedback's just so easy. Go get it. And I give in the book several ways to do it.
Yeah,
There's special questions you have to ask a certain way that I think will vet out more honest feedback, because that's another challenge that people have.
Can you share any of those?
My favorite is I like to do I call it a feedback 4-pack. You should get your manager has to be one of them, somebody that likes you a lot in your department, somebody that's neutral to negative on you, and somebody in another area that intersects with you. And I like to meet with them 3 times a year at least and ask the question, how do you think others perceive me? And the reason you ask that is because if you say, how do you perceive me? You're not going to get an honest answer. But for some reason, when we ask somebody, how do others perceive me? It gives them carte blanche to share with you. And you're going to get a more honest answer. And I think it's also helpful to say, from your perspective, what is the thing I do? What are the things I'm working on? Because you're going to be surprised sometimes that what you think you're known for and what you're actually known for are very, very different things. And I think that's important. And then I always like asking somebody, give me advice. How do you succeed here? Or what have you found to work? Because the wisdom of others and other people love talking about their experience as well. And the wisdom that they've gained, it can be a really great relationship builder and a great way for you to learn something. And then just don't argue. Do not argue.
Yes.
Take it. Say thank you. Say thank you. And then take it and continue to get the feedback as you go. And as long as you keep those conversations short and sweet and you listen, people will respond in kind, and you'll find that they open up more and more as you do it. And it will feel easier and easier to you to get the feedback.
And how do you advise when you hear something that is truly surprising? You can't believe that you're perceived that way, or you can't believe that they think that that's your job when you've been prioritizing these other things. So how do you recommend breathing that out?
Breathe. Well, the most common scenario is when a manager gives an appraisal of somebody that they feel like is completely off base about them. And in that case, we don't argue. Your manager, perception is reality. Remember that. Perception is reality. And if your manager thinks something about you, it is a fruitless operation for you to talk them out of that perception. So we never go backwards. What you can say is, while I disagree strongly with that assessment. However, I hear what you're saying and I'm listening. And I'm going to do everything I can to give you proof points in the future that I can do the thing that you're asking me to do. Because you can change perception going forward, even if their stuff's totally off base and you start giving them proof points. Hey, I listened to you and I included so-and-so in this meeting, and I wanted, I tried to be more inclusive in the meeting. I just wanted to see how you felt like that went. And you call that, they're like, oh, all of a sudden you're creating a new story going forward, but you'll never talk them out of how they believe about you going backwards.
Yes. And I love how you said somewhere in there around like planting words, like what you're saying, if it's about being inclusive, or if it's about being strategic or whatever, like you know what you want to be perceived as, and then you seed those words in your communication.
That's right. You seed the words and you seed the stories. I mean, you're creating a story about yourself and your branding in a company at all times by the way you behave and what you say and the words that come out of your mouth. I would never leave that story to someone else to create. So do it deliberately.
Yeah, that's really important for you all listeners to think about. How do you want to be perceived? What are some of those key attributes? And then what are the stories that you could tell about how you behave that way? And one of them might be about being powerful or tough. That's one of the stories that you tell, that somebody was perceived as not being tough, and she was like, wait, I'm really tough. So she had to like shift that around. So talking about power, in particular as female leaders, sometimes power is a tough word or something that we don't want to be associated as being too difficult to work with, would be a way that somehow that would get mixed up.
Yeah.
So for women specifically, what lies do you hear about power, and why is power so important?
Well, power is important because power and influence are ultimately the things that are going to give you the credibility to move up in a company, if that's what you want.
Yeah.
So we need to have it. And if we don't have it, then relying on somebody else to give it to us is not a good strategy. I mean, I just wouldn't rely on that at all. So, I've learned so many lessons about power and influence through the years, but probably one of the bigger ones is that like everybody at every level has the ability to be this problem solver and a curator of knowledge for the company, because the company, what's important to the company is numbers, results. How, can I do something faster, better? Is the customer happier? But they really speak the language of numbers. And so I tell people, go listen to your quarterly reports, understand where the company's headed, where it's not headed, understand what's going on and what the problems are, because it's going to help you be more effective. Study at home, read and understand what's going on in your industry. I tell a story of Cubicle Guy. He actually has a real name. His name's Brian. But he was just a cubicle guy that was in a cubicle, very, very mid-level. And I started walking past offices and saw Brian like meeting with the executives, drawing on a whiteboard. And I'm like, that's weird. Then he would be having lunch with people and drawing things on napkins. And then one time I walked past the CEO's office, and there he is with the CEO intently looking at him as he draws this thing. Brian ended up rising really quickly within the company, and he became the storyteller for the company and doing all the board decks and everything, because he had this uncanny ability to pay attention to what the problems were and what was needed and what the company was talking about and the CEO needed, and figure out, that vein of gold, that way to go through. And everybody can do that. Everybody can do that. And part of it is being intensely curious. Why not do that? Ask questions, not instead of being a ghost in a company and just nodding your head yes, to say, why would we do that, or why not? And he was really an intensely curious guy.
Incredible. Yeah, I remember that story from the Gap chapter, right? Because this is like you're saying, like cubicle guy found the gaps and he looked for them, and then he had a way to say it. So for those who are listening that are like, I see the gaps, but I don't know, like, I'm just going to go march into the CEO's office. You're not suggesting that, but you are saying have your opinion, share your brilliance, share your superpowers. How would you recommend someone take a step forward?
Yeah, I think start small, first of all. My advice, if you're going to identify a gap, start with a low risk one.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're going to not get it perfect. And if you pick something too high risk and your name's on it, that's bad. If you're just getting used to this idea, pick a small gap where you can win, something within your sphere of influence. Get your manager to buy off. There's a gap worksheet that you can identify the resources and the things you need. Start to measure how it's making a difference. And then start telling the story about it, and experiment with this whole idea that I can see something and solve it. And then get your manager used to the fact that you can see something and solve it with numbers. Create your own dashboard. My gosh, do not rely on somebody else's dashboard. Start measuring what you're doing every day. It also helps keep you very focused, by the way, towards the top priorities. If you go in and you're intensely focused on that. And then you can go bigger. You can go bigger and more cross-functional as you go, but start small.
Start small. Oh, I love that. Get the reps in, build up your strength there, get the confidence. And I think you're also saying the brand or the perception that people have of you of like identifying those and solving them effectively is also a part of the how to be successful and powerful.
My first big promotion was solving a gap problem. I was probably 30 years old. And I worked for Stephen Covey, and I realized that we weren't doing EEOC reports, this equal opportunity reports in HR. I'm like, hey, I think legally we're supposed to be doing this. Nobody's got it. And I think we could get audited if we don't. Can I fix this for us? And they're like, yeah, knock yourself out. We were audited. We were audited like a month after I finished the project. Saved the day. The executives were like, oh my gosh, thank you. And that got me my first big promotion. Was just playing in the gap, seeing something that needed to be done and kind of rejiggering my day to be able to focus on it.
How did you even realize that was a missing piece?
I can't remember how I learned.
You don't know. Okay.
I stumbled into it and thought,
like, wait, why don't we have one of these?
And then like, oh, we're supposed to be doing some reports. We could get audited on that. Like, does anybody know what this thing is? Because I think it might be important.
Right. And you talked about curiosity. That's really an outcome of being curious and wondering. Like, you weren't blaming anyone. You were just curious.
Well, we always think that somebody's got it, or that the people higher up than us, they must have already considered this. And it just simply isn't true. I mean, if you if you look at how ideas bubble up and go down,
Sure.
we miss a lot of stuff. And I have seen so many examples of people who finally went, hey, I see a problem, or why aren't we doing this? Or have we thought about doing it this way? And that it's been, trajectory changing for a company.
Oh, without a doubt. And that might feel like you're bringing up an uncomfortable topic or something that people don't want to talk about, or maybe even unintentionally placing blame on someone's, inability
Right.
to do their job or what have you. So that makes me think about conflict, which is another thing that you talk a lot about in this book and in general as the job doctor. What could you tell us about conflict and why it's so important, and any tips you have?
Yeah, I think I'm going to generalize. I know it's not true for all people, but often women think in careers that conflict, the absence of conflict is the goal, or that if we play nice, that everything is going to work out. And I can't tell you how many executives I've let go who are not willing to speak up when they need to
Yes.
speak up. We trust people who we trust the people who tell us the truth. Like, I had a right-hand guy who told me some really hard truths about myself at one point. He did it in a way, though, that I felt like he was on my team and he was a partner. And I think that's the hard part. I think people are afraid of cancel culture. And so they say nothing, or they go too far the other way and they're like scorched earth approach and don't know how to get it over the finish line. And they're either way afraid that they're going to be let go. And so I talk a lot about how do you build trust in a conversation. And I would say that, that whole, there's probably 2 chapters on it, but of the whole thing, advice that I would have is don't have halfway conversations. That's when you speak a portion of the truth in a hope that they gather 100% of what you're saying, which happens all day long,
All the
everywhere
time.
in a company. And the other thing is, if you can just assume good intent in the other person, and I can give you 3 magic questions I think can help you save a conversation, even if you botch the rest of it. But if you bring up a concern and then say, is that what you intended? Do you see it differently? Or is there some information missing that would help me understand? Those 3 magic questions keep you in a partner conversation where you're not pinning somebody against the wall like you're bad. You're assuming good intent.
There's
And
more
it
to know.
allows the conversation to continue, because I can't tell you how many times the manager's gone, oh my gosh, no, I didn't intend to do that at all. That's not at all what I meant. So learning to have conversations, and honest conversations, builds trust. It doesn't break it if you do it the right way. And it actually gives you a reputation that you want in a company, of somebody that will tell you not just what you want to hear, but what needs to be talked about. And I know there's a lot of people listening that say, no, that's not true. I'll get fired if I do it.
Right.
But I
And you're like,
promise
I
you,
promise you.
test it. Test it.
Yes. And you're
Because
saying ask those questions and really listen. Don't just listen for the thing that
right.
you are expecting them to say, right? You're saying
Yeah.
open yourself up. There has to be more to the story.
Yeah, I like to believe that most people are trying to do the right thing. Most managers aren't trying to be a bad manager. Most people go to work and want to make a difference.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then you have to be able to listen well enough to get to where's the reasonableness in it. And there usually is, if you simply can get people together and listening to each other.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Gold. All right. So I have a actual job doctor question for you from a
Ooh,
former client. Now that I have your book, I'm sending it to former clients too.
awesome.
I wish I had this then. And then it just makes me think about the Times Square. I want to go back to that. You in Times Square. Just tell our listeners about your experience when your book was launched.
It was so cool.
Yeah.
I went, so March 23rd, the book came out. Went to New York. I got to visit at LinkedIn and some of these big companies and just show up for lunch, and with a pile of books. And it was so crazy because it's the first time my husband went, oh my gosh, you're a big deal. Like, all of these young people would come up to me and go, you're the job doctor. Or you're the job doctor. I know, I recognize you. And he's like, oh my gosh, people in New York know her.
Yeah.
And I got to have a billboard on Times Square that had my book, and it was really fun. I mean, what a cool book launch. And the book stayed in the #1 spot on Amazon for quite a few days, and then stayed in the top overall for quite a while. And
Mm-hmm.
we still continue to sell good. And it's just me. That's the crazy part. I'm not part of some big company. I'm not part of a big, I don't have a big PR firm representing me. It's me. And
Yeah.
it's a couple of people trying to make good things happen. And it's just been such a great journey.
And you're scratching an itch that a lot of people have. So I appreciate you showing up and answering the call, literally and figuratively. And it's really helping people. So I just want to like shout it from a mountaintop. All right. So here's her question.
Okay.
She says, Tessa, I recently stepped into a VP role, C level 2, at a large global company, XX billion in revenue. A friend of mine who is now a C-level executive at a smaller global company, 1X billion, has approached me with an opportunity to join their private organization, working directly for him in a role with a broader remit. I'm struggling to compare the two opportunities. My friend is a known entity, a respected leader, and a history of looking out for my best interests. On the other hand, my current boss seems great, but I'm so new to the role that I haven't fully grasped the potential here yet. I'm over 40, I value loyalty, and I'm grappling with the idea of making a second jump in a relatively short term. What are the key factors I should consider when evaluating this new opportunity? And additionally, how can I navigate the situation without burning bridges or risking my reputation at my current company?
If you go, there will be bridges burnt. So let's just get that out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean it's not the right thing for you to do. Ultimately, I want this person to know that you do what is best for your career, not what's comfortable for other people. The way that I would evaluate it, I think this is really useful. There's a values analysis I have in the book and a little test you can take. You rank yourself 1 to 10 on how important is impact to me, how important is autonomy, being able to do the job the way I want to do the job, how important is flexibility. That means, in office versus remote. How important are the relationships I have with people? Because for some of us, like, I don't care who I work with. I can get along with about anybody. It's not a big driver, but for others, it's huge.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's one more in that category. I can't think of it right now, but
Mm-hmm.
you rank yourself 1 to 10 in those areas.
Yeah.
And then,
Here it is.
risk.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
how much of a risk am I willing to take?
Yeah.
And then I want you to rate the company you're at. Another independent 1 to 10. And
Yeah.
what you're going to find is if there is a gap of more than 3 points, it's worth taking a look at and understanding. When I did this analysis for myself, I had started at a company and I just wasn't happy anymore. I'm just like, I just can't stand it anymore. And I'm like, well, what's the it? And when I looked at the numbers, I realized something had changed for me. Number one, I wanted more flexibility. Now that I was getting older, I wanted to be able to take days off when I wanted to. But the more important insight was, I'm a person that likes to drive impact. I had already built the company and now we were in maintenance mode. And I realized I'm a builder, not a maintainer. And so I think doing that analysis will help you understand, at least to the best of your degree with the company that you're at, if there are major gaps, and then the company as far as you know it, it will help you make a little bit better of a decision in regards to that. It's not always going to be clean cut. I mean, this isn't going to be the one size fits all approach, but it will help you get clearer on your thinking around it.
Right. Oh, and I love, and your opening line was that she should do what's best for her in her career and not be so concerned about the bridges and otherwise, right?
Yeah.
I think that's
Try
important.
and strip it away and just say, what is the best thing for where I want to go and what I want to do and what I know is a fit for me.
Yeah, and where I can add value.
Yeah.
And and being able to use the strengths I've been given. That's great advice. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So are you ready for some rapid fire questions? I didn't
Sure.
even ask you if you'd be
You
open
bet.
to this. All right. I figure as a job doctor, you're used to anything coming your
I'm
way.
so used to it. Yes.
Yeah. All right. So the first one is the best or worst advice you've ever been given.
Oh my gosh. Probably the worst advice I've been given is just shut up. Just sit down and shut up, or, be quiet and let other people take the risks in the room.
Yeah. That's really
It's horrible
bad advice. Yeah. What never fails to make you laugh?
It's embarrassing to say this, but cute dog videos on TikTok is is a thing for me. And I show them to my husband all the time. So
And
I
is
love
it
them.
a particular breed or any dog?
No, I just love animals. My husband does not like animals. He doesn't understand that they are a deep need of mine. So I like dog videos, and I think they're just so cute.
Oh, they're so cute. I love that. Like when they're in the snow,
Oh,
sledding
they're
down a
so
hill, that
cute.
just kills me.
Mhm.
What's a characteristic of people that you notice and deeply admire?
Oh boy. I like people that just keep the resilience. They just keep getting up. I have so much respect because we all fail. I've failed, and when you get up and you just dust yourself off, I just think that that is a characteristic that I value incredibly in people because it helps me keep going during hard times.
Right. Ah, beautiful. What's one of your pet peeves?
I have so many. I would say my pet peeve is emails that are more than 2 paragraphs long. I just, if it even actually more than 1 paragraph long, if it's more than like 1 or 2 paragraphs long, it's too long and
It's
you
too
should have
long.
called me.
Brilliant. What do you think is the key to living a great life?
Well, I would say, I think good friends, good friends, good food, and I really subscribe to the idea you should do something once a year that scares the crap out of you, and I think it keeps you feeling young. I tried
Yes.
out when I was a single mom. I tried out to be a backup singer in a band, and I filled in for this band and did that. And last year I tried this crazy contraption that you hook on your feet, and when you're in the water, like instead of water skiing, it shoots you into the air, and you can do tricks. And I was the only adult that tried it, and I'll tell you, it just made me feel alive. I just think trying things that scare
Something.
you and getting over your fear of certain things. It has a really positive effect on a person.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that so much. So you also are a fly fisher person. What
Yes.
do you associate with fly fishing?
What do I associate? Oh, fly fishing
Yeah.
for me is just life. Honestly, it's
Mm.
if you ever watch Ted Lasso, where the guy's like, soccer is life, and
Yeah.
fly fishing is life for me. I mean,
In what way? What is it? I've never done it, so I don't know.
Oh my gosh, you get to go on a river and there are like moose or deer, and the sound of the river, and it's
Yeah.
quiet, and you watch the sunsets and you catch fish. Something about it is just so cathartic. When I got divorced, my dad said, "You have to learn to fly fish. I want you to go take your money you were going to spend on therapy and go buy fly fishing stuff. It will serve you better." And I did. And it's
And
my
you did.
therapy. I love it.
Oh my gosh, that is so beautiful. Well, I am beyond grateful for you, Tessa. Thank you for sharing this precious time with us, for writing this book, for being the job doctor, for speaking the truth to us. You're just truly a gem, and I'm so grateful for you.
Oh, thank you. It was really fun to just visit about things I love. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to R.O.G, Return on Generosity podcast. Please help us grow by subscribing and reviewing us on your favorite podcast player. And for more information, visit bridgebetween.com. We grow when we give.
우리는 나누면서 성숙합니다.
We grow when we give.
On rayonne quand on donne.
We grow when we give.